find the domain of a square root function. A square root function. So the key for this is to realize that the domain, the valid points that can go into the square root function in the real numbers, would be anything that allows the object or expression under the radical to be bigger than or equal to 0. So expression under radical needs to be greater than or equal to 0. If it were less than 0, that's where we get into the complex numbers, the imaginary numbers. Okay, so in this particular example, the object or expression under the square root is 9 minus 9x. So we're going to take that amount, that expression, 9 minus 9x, and we are going to say make it bigger than or equal to 0, because that's what we want to happen to be the valid domain. So subtract 9 from both sides, negative 9x bigger than or equal to negative 9, then divide by negative 9 to yield x less than or equal to 1. Don't forget, I divided by a negative, and therefore I have to make sure that I flip my inequality sign over, like we discussed in class. So the valid domain is all numbers that are less than or equal to 1, and if you needed to do this in an interval notation, we'd say we start at negative infinity and we go all the way up to 1, including 1. So this would be an interval notation for this, but I believe it might be more convenient here just to leave it as x less than or equal to 1. So try this one. Now, assuming you paused it and tried it for a second here, you may have made a very natural error, but I tried to color it so that way the error would be less likely to be made. Remember that the rule was that for the domain, the expression under the radical has to be bigger than or equal to 0. So in this problem, what's actually under the radical? Well, just negative 7x. The 14 is essentially irrelevant to the question of the domain of this function because it's not under the radical. So it would affect the range, but not the domain. Now, negative 7x, we need to require this to be bigger than or equal to 0 to be part of the valid domain. So divide by negative 7 to yield x less than or equal to 0. Again, flipping the inequality symbol due to the division by a negative number. And there's your final answer. We need x to be less than or equal to 0. In an interval notation, that would be from negative infinity to 0.